Ever woken up to find yourself the wrong side of an alien zoo? I mean, sure, everyone's had those mornings where you question how many drinks you had last night, but this was different. Bryn woke to the sight of a ceiling that looked like a Salvador Dali painting on acid. The walls were translucent, the color of regret, and the floor. Well, let's just say if you dropped anything, you'd better be prepared to fish it out of some unholy blend of Jell-O and Velcro. "Mornin', sunshine," came a voice from the other side of the room. The voice belonged to Torin, a telepathic strategist whose talents were now being wasted on deciphering breakfast cereal ingredients rather than interstellar war plans. Bryn groaned, pushing herself up on an elbow, feeling every single one of her bad decisions from the previous night. "Any idea where the hell we are, or did I just drink something that was past its expiration date?" Torin shrugged, that infuriating "I'm too cool for this" smirk plastered across his face. "Oh, just another day in paradise. We're guests at the galaxy's most exclusive zoo. No entry fee, but the exit's a bitch." Bryn squinted through the translucent wall at the aliens milling around outside, like they were on a lazy Sunday stroll through a park. "Great, an audience, just what I need when I'm not at my best. They're studying us," Torin said, his tone annoyingly matter-of-fact, trying to figure out what makes us tick. "Apparently they'd rather do it by poking around in our dreams instead of just asking nicely." Bryn rolled her eyes. "Of course they are, because why not go for the invasive approach? Guess they're having a hard time with yours," Torin added with a sarcastic grin. "Who knew your dreams could be such an enigma?" Bryn laughed, a sound that was more bitter than amused. "Wouldn't be the first time someone's told me I'm hard to understand." She finally stood up, wiping some of the floor's weird residue off her pants. The room was stark and devoid of anything resembling home, unless your home was a prison with better mood lighting. "So, any plans on how we bust out of here? Or should we start getting used to the idea of being someone's bedazzled hamster?" Torin scratched his chin, which was his go-to move when he wanted to look thoughtful. "Working on it. Turns out these aliens are just as confused by sarcasm as they are by our dreams." "That's a relief," Bryn said. "Means I can still annoy them to death." The aliens outside were watching them with a mix of curiosity and befuddlement, not unlike a bunch of toddlers trying to figure out how to assemble IKEA furniture. They were tall, gangly creatures with skin that gleamed like cheap jewelry under the flickering lights. Their eyes, however, were unsettling, black pools that seemed to swallow the light whole. "What's their deal anyway?" Bryn asked, peering at the aliens with a morbid fascination. "Apparently they're here to learn about intelligent life forms," Torin explained, "which makes you wonder why the hell they grabbed us." Bryn snorted. Maybe they just wanted an example of what not to do. Suddenly, there was a loud hum, and the walls shifted like someone had picked up the room and given it a good shake. Both Bryn and Torin staggered, trying to keep their balance. "What now?" Bryn grumbled, bracing herself against the nearest wall. Torin's eyes narrowed, his telepathic senses tingling. "I think they're trying to communicate, or maybe they're just messing with us." The humming intensified, and then, as if on cue, a voice reverberated in their minds. It was smooth, like honey poured over gravel. "We wish to comprehend your dreams," it said, in that annoying tone people use when they think they're being profound. Bryn rolled her eyes. "Great, another TED talk in my head." Torin stepped forward, addressing the invisible speaker with a hint of mockery. "You know, you could just ask us about our dreams instead of playing cosmic couch therapist. Our methods are more efficient," the voice replied, sounding slightly offended. "Efficient?" Bryn gave a derisive snort, more like invasive. "Your dreams defy logic and structure," the voice continued, oblivious to the sarcasm. "They are perplexing. Welcome to humanity," Bryn said, arms crossed. "We're a walking contradiction." There was a pause, as if the aliens were processing this information. Torin held a hand to his temple, his telepathy picking up on their confusion. "They can't handle the sheer chaos of our subconscious," he said, clearly amused. "Their brains are melting down because of a bad night at the movies in our heads." "About time we had an advantage," Bryn said, a sly smile creeping across her face. "So how do we exploit it?" Torin considered the question, tapping his foot against the sticky floor. "If we could somehow amplify our dream signals, it might overload their systems." Bryn nodded, catching on. "And while they're busy having a collective aneurysm, we make our grand escape." "Bingo," Torin said. The plan was as shaky as a politician's promise, but it was all they had. Bryn glanced around the room, looking for anything that might help. There wasn't much to work with, a couple of nondescript panels, some alien tech gadgets that looked more decorative than useful. "Think we can jury-rig something out of this junk?" she asked. Torin frowned, his eyes scanning the room. "Maybe. If I had a week in a workshop, sure, but here." Now Bryn sighed, her optimism deflating faster than a birthday balloon in a cactus factory. Figures. The humming in their heads faded, leaving a heavy silence. The aliens had retreated, perhaps to ponder their next move or to have a good cry about the human condition. Bryn looked at Torin, trying to muster some semblance of hope. "So, what now?" We sit on our asses and wait for inspiration to strike, Torin chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Something like that, or we could just sleep and hope our dreams do the heavy lifting. Sleep, Bryn echoed, a trace of disbelief coloring her voice. In this dump, Torin shrugged. Got a better idea, Bryn didn't. So they settled into an uneasy truce with the floor, trying to ignore the alien eyes watching them like curious, sociopathic cats. As she lay there, Bryn couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Captured by aliens, trapped in a zoo, and now banking on incomprehensible dreams to save the day. You know, she said, staring at the ceiling, I've had better Mondays. Torin smirked. And worse, as the lights dimmed and the room settled into a muted twilight, Bryn let out a long breath. Maybe, just maybe, their dreams could be the key to turning the tables. After all, if they were going to be stuck in this cosmic sideshow, they might as well give the spectators something to remember. She closed her eyes, hoping her dreams would be loud enough to shatter the confines of this bizarre zoo. And as sleep pulled her under, she couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, humanity's innate chaos could be the ultimate escape plan. Bryn's eyes fluttered open to the annoying sensation of something prodding her shoulder. Her first thought was that Torin had finally snapped and decided to use her as a human drum set. But the reality was much stranger. An alien with eyes like black marbles and a face that looked like a Picasso painting gone wrong was staring at her with a mix of curiosity and impatience. You're invading my personal space, Bryn mumbled, swatting at the prodders. Tentacles, she realized with an unsettling shiver. The alien recoiled but didn't leave, its gaze unwavering. Bryn groaned and sat up, the sticky floor clinging to her like an overeager toddler. Don't you have a life to go back to? A family of blobs or something? Torin, who lay sprawled a few feet away, chuckled. Seems like we've made some new friends or fans. Hard to tell with that face. Yeah, well, fan club's closed. No autographs today, Bryn shot back, rolling her shoulders. The room had changed again, as if the aliens couldn't decide on a theme. Now it was a bizarre zoo meets art gallery, complete with other captives. There were aliens of all shapes and sizes, each stuck in their own translucent cell of dream-induced misery. Some floated, some oozed, and one even resembled a walking pile of spaghetti. All of them had a glazed look in their eyes, like they'd been binge-watching bad reality TV without a break. Looks like we're not the only ones having a bad day, Bryn said, gesturing towards their fellow inmates. Guess we're the new attraction at this intergalactic freak show. Torin pushed himself up, his eyes scanning the room. They've all succumbed to the telepathic probing. Must have had their brains scrambled like eggs, Bryn snorted. Lucky them. Wish I could check out for a bit. The alien still hovering nearby finally spoke, or at least attempted to, its voice a garbled mix of sounds that made Bryn wince. It might have been a request for help, or maybe it was just singing an alien lullaby. Hard to tell, really. You'd think they'd have a universal translator for this mess, Bryn muttered, rubbing her temples. Torin tapped his head, a sign that he'd picked up something telepathically. They don't get us and it's driving them nuts. Bryn raised an eyebrow. What, the whole humans are puzzles wrapped in enigmas thing? Pretty much. Our dreams don't fit into their neat little boxes. Too much chaos, too many contradictions. Bryn smirked. So what you're saying is our natural talent for being a hot mess is our greatest asset. Basically, Torin replied, his tone more amused than concerned. It's like trying to explain quantum physics to a goldfish. The alien outside their cell seemed to pick up on their conversation, or maybe it just got tired of staring. It drifted away, joining a small group of similar creatures who appeared to be having a heated discussion, complete with tentacle waving and dramatic gesturing. Looks like they're plotting something, Bryn observed, tilting her head. Maybe a heist? Ocean's 11, Alien Edition, Torin shrugged. Or they're just as confused as we are. Either way, we need to use this to our advantage. The surreal atmosphere was starting to wear on Bryn, the combination of alien aesthetics and the zoo's unsettling vibe making her feel like she was trapped in a bad acid trip. So, any ideas on how we exploit our chaotic genius to get out of here? Torin started pacing, his mind clearly working overtime. If we can keep scrambling their attempts to understand us, it might create a window of opportunity, but we'll need to stay unpredictable. Give him something they can't decode. Bryn laughed, a sound that was more bitter than joyous. Unpredictable, that's my middle name. Well, one of them anyway. As they plotted, the aliens seemed to grow increasingly frustrated, their movements sharp and agitated. Bryn couldn't help but feel a small thrill at their irritation. Maybe it was petty, but when you were trapped in a zoo, petty victories were all you had. Think they're getting annoyed? Bryn asked, watching one alien smack another with a tentacle. Annoyed, they are on the verge of a meltdown, Torin noted, sounding almost gleeful. Our dreams are like a virus in their system. And the more frustrated they get, the sloppier they'll become. Good, let him sweat a bit, Bryn said, folding her arms. Maybe they'll realize that not everything can be solved with mind games and dream invasions. The alien argument outside their cell reached a fever pitch, and for a moment, Bryn thought she saw one of them throw something that looked suspiciously like a tantrum. She couldn't help but grin. You know, if they weren't holding us captive, I'd almost feel sorry for them. Almost, Torin echoed, a wicked gleam in his eye. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a new alien entered the scene. This one was different, taller, with an air of authority that suggested it was in charge, or at least thought it was. Its skin was a deep shade of purple, and it moved with a fluid grace that was almost hypnotic. Great, Bryn muttered under her breath. The big boss has arrived. The new alien's presence seemed to silence the others, who immediately ceased their bickering and turned their attention towards it. With a wave of its arm, tentacle, the purple alien issued a command, and the room went silent, the only sound the low hum of the zoo's systems. Torin's eyes narrowed as he focused on the newcomer. I think it's here to negotiate. Bryn rolled her eyes. Oh, now they want to talk. When poking around in our dreams doesn't work, they decide to play nice. The purple alien stepped up to their cell, its eyes locked onto Bryn and Torin. Despite the lack of any discernible facial expressions, its intent was clear. This was a showdown. Your resistance is. Unexpected, came the voice in their heads, smoother than the others, but with an undercurrent of frustration. Bryn smirked. Yeah, we're full of surprises. Keeps life interesting. Your dreams, it continued, ignoring her quip, are unlike any we have encountered. They disrupt our understanding. Torin crossed his arms, a picture of feigned boredom. Sorry if our subconscious isn't up to code. Maybe next time you should try asking before you start sifting through our heads. The alien shifted slightly, its gaze never wavering. We seek to understand your kind. By locking us up and playing with our heads, Bryn shot back. Sounds like a real friendly approach. Your cooperation would be appreciated, the alien insisted, though its tone suggested it was more of a demand than a request. Bryn exchanged a glance with Torin, a silent agreement passing between them. Here's the thing, she began, taking a step closer to the translucent wall separating them from their captors. You want to know about humans? Then maybe you should start by treating us like people, not lab rats. The alien seemed to consider her words, its gaze flicking between the two humans. Finally, it spoke, its tone more measured. What do you propose? Torin raised an eyebrow. You're actually willing to listen. The alien inclined its head, an acknowledgement that was as close to a nod as they were likely to get. We are open to alternatives. Bryn couldn't help but feel a small thrill of triumph. It wasn't much, but it was a start. All right, how about this? You let us out of this box and we'll tell you about humans. Answer your questions, share our culture. The real stuff, not whatever you're trying to dig out of our nightmares. The alien was silent for a long moment, and for a second, Bryn thought it would refuse, but then it nodded slowly. Agreed. Torin's eyebrows shot up in surprise, and Bryn felt a surge of cautious optimism. Maybe they could turn this situation around, find a way to work with their captors rather than against them. The alien raised a hand, and the walls of their cell began to dissolve, the translucent barrier vanishing like smoke in the wind. Bryn stepped forward, resisting the urge to make a break for it. This was a delicate moment, and they couldn't afford to screw it up. First things first, she said, a mischievous grin on her face. You should know that humans love a good story. So why don't we start there? As the aliens gathered around, curious and eager to learn, Bryn and Torin exchanged a glance, a silent promise that they'd find a way to make the most of this unexpected opportunity. After all, if there was one thing humans were good at, it was improvisation. And as they began to weave tales of Earth, spinning stories that were equal parts truth and exaggeration, Bryn couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, they weren't so different from the aliens after all. Both were trying to understand the universe, one chaotic dream at a time. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Bryn felt a glimmer of hope. They'd taken the first step out of the zoo, and with any luck, they'd find a way to navigate this strange new world together. And if the aliens thought they were perplexed by human dreams, just wait until they got a load of human ingenuity. The alien zoo's fluorescent lights buzzed louder than a broken promise, casting their eerie glow over the ever-changing room. Bryn and Torin, now free from their transparent prison cell, stood at the heart of this intergalactic petting zoo, surrounded by a menagerie of confused creatures, all of them blissfully unaware of their roles as cosmic curiosities. So this is freedom, Bryn mused, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she eyed the translucent walls that loomed like soap bubbles on the verge of popping. Feels like we want a trip to the universe's worst theme park. Yeah, Torin replied, one eye on the purple alien who'd let them out. Except instead of Mickey Mouse, we've got Picasso-faced mind readers who can't even crack a human dream. The alien in charge, a tall, regal presence with a face that seemed hastily assembled from spare parts, had retreated to confer with its tentacled colleagues. Judging by the flurry of telepathic chatter that followed, the conversation was anything but polite. Think they're plotting our demise? Bryn asked, watching the alien powwow with a morbid curiosity. More like they're arguing over who gets the blame for this mess, Torin shot back, crossing his arms. Can't say I blame them, we're not exactly model prisoners. Bryn snorted. Model prisoners, please. We're as cooperative as cats on a leash. The aliens, meanwhile, had decided on a new approach. The big boss alien floated back, its expression unreadable but its intent clear. Your dreams, it began, that silky telepathic voice slicing through their thoughts, are a source of disruption. Tell us something we don't know, Bryn quipped, hands on her hips. Our subconscious is a minefield. Got a plan, or are you just here to state the obvious? The alien's eyes flickered like malfunctioning LED. We will intensify our study, employ new methods. Sounds ominous, Torin said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Let me guess, more probing. Gonna need a bigger shovel, friend, or a brain surgeon, Bryn added. Because you're gonna have a hell of a time getting past the junk pile that is my psyche. Ignoring their banter, the alien gestured, and suddenly, the room's walls shifted, transforming into a kaleidoscope of colors and patterns that would make any sane person reach for a pair of sunglasses. The sheer sensory overload was enough to make your head spin. Whoa, easy on the acid trip, Bryn said, shielding her eyes. Are they trying to mess with our heads or just redecorate? Both, I think, Torin replied, squinting at the garish display. They're cranking up the weird factor to see if they can crack our mental defenses. Bryn rolled her eyes. Joke's on them. My mental defenses are about as sturdy as a wet paper bag. The alien leader gestured again, and the room plunged into darkness. For a moment, the silence was absolute, the kind that presses against your eardrums until even your own heartbeat sounds like a drum solo. Then came the dreams. Not the soft, comforting kind that wrap around you like a blanket on a cold night. No, these were invasive, like having someone root through your underwear drawer while you watched helplessly from across the room. Bryn found herself standing in a distorted version of her childhood home, the walls warped and twisted, shifting like some nightmare Escher painting. Her father sat in the living room, flicking through TV channels that alternated between static and grotesque parodies of family sitcoms. Nice to see the dream department's gone full-budget horror, she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. In the corner of her vision, Torin appeared, looking like a badly rendered video game character, pixels blurring at the edges. Hey Bryn, fancy meeting you here in Dreamland. Yeah, well, don't get too comfy, Bryn replied, kicking at the dream furniture, which dissolved into smoke. These creeps are digging through our heads like a kid through a cereal box looking for the toy. Torin nodded, his expression one of grim amusement. Let's give him something to chew on, shall we? Ever try lucid dreaming? Bryn grinned, the kind of grin that usually precedes someone doing something incredibly stupid. Can't be harder than parallel parking a spaceship. With a shared nod, they focused, trying to wrest control of the dream from their captors. It was like trying to steer a car with no brakes, but slowly they began to shape the dreamscape, twisting it to their will. The living room morphed into a scene from an old western, complete with tumbleweeds and a badly tuned player piano. Bryn tipped her imaginary hat, a gun suddenly appearing in her hand. How about a quick draw, partner? The aliens, watching from the edges of their consciousness, seemed taken aback, their attempts to manipulate the dream faltering. Bryn could feel their confusion, a static buzz at the back of her mind. Keep it up, Torin said, his own dream self now sporting a cowboy hat and spurs. We're throwing them off balance, Bryn laughed, the sound as sharp as a whip crack. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. They spun the dream into a whirlwind of chaotic scenes. One moment they were astronauts in a space opera, lasers and explosions all around. The next, they found themselves in a noir detective story, shadowy alleyways and flickering street lamps setting the scene. The aliens' frustration was palpable, their telepathic murmurs a cacophony of discontent. Bryn could almost see them, huddled around their instruments of psychological warfare, scratching their metaphorical heads. Think we broke them yet? She asked, a little breathless from the exertion. Not quite, Torin replied, his grin feral. But we're getting there. The dream shifted again, this time into a surreal landscape that defied logic and physics. Floating islands drifted lazily through the sky, tethered by vines that swayed in a non-existent breeze. Bryn and Torin stood at the edge of a cliff, overlooking the strange vista. Now this is what I call a view, Bryn said, leaning dangerously over the edge. Torin chuckled. Not exactly what the travel brochures promised, but it'll do. Just then, the dream wavered, the edges blurring as the aliens redoubled their efforts to regain control. Bryn felt the pressure increasing, like 1,000 icy fingers prying at the corners of her mind. Hold on, Torin warned, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining their tenuous grip on the dream. Bryn nodded, gritting her teeth as she focused all her willpower on keeping the dream intact. It was a battle of wills, a mental tug-of-war that would end with them either victorious or catatonic. Just a little longer, she muttered, more to herself than to Torin. We can do this. The dreamscape distorted, colors bleeding together like wet paint, but they held firm, refusing to let the aliens win. It was exhausting, the kind of mental strain that made you feel like you'd been running a marathon with an elephant on your back. Finally, after what felt like hours, the pressure eased, the aliens pulling back, defeated for the moment. Bryn and Torin stood together, triumphant but exhausted, the dream beginning to crumble around them. "Nice work," Torin said, his voice a mix of pride and relief. "Didn't know you had it in you," Bryn smirked, though her expression was more tired than cocky. "Neither did I. Guess we're full of surprises." The dream dissolved, and they woke in the alien zoo, lying on the cold, strange floor. The alien leader loomed over them, its expression inscrutable but its frustration evident in the sharpness of its mental presence. "You resist," it intoned, the words heavy with grudging respect. "We're human," Bryn replied, pushing herself up with a groan. "Resistance is kind of our thing." The alien hesitated, its gaze flicking between the two humans. "Your resilience is noted." Torin rolled onto his side, propping himself up on one elbow. "And what are you going to do about it?" The alien didn't answer immediately, its silence weighing down on them like a lead blanket. Finally it spoke, its voice contemplative. "Perhaps we have underestimated the complexity of your kind." "Yeah, well," Bryn said, managing a weak smile. "Maybe next time, try asking nicely before you play psychoanalyzing Space Invader." The alien leader nodded, a gesture that might have been a concession, or maybe just acknowledgement of their stubbornness. "We will consider alternative methods." With that, the alien retreated, its fellow mind-melders in tow. Bryn and Torin exchanged a weary glance, the kind that spoke volumes without a single word. "Think we bought ourselves some time?" Torin asked, rubbing the back of his neck. "Maybe," Bryn replied, though her voice was laced with doubt. "But we're not out of the woods yet. They'll be back, and next time they might not play so nice." Torin nodded, his expression grim but determined. "Then we'll just have to be ready for them." As the alien zoo's lights continued their relentless buzzing, Bryn and Torin settled in, aware that the battle was far from over. They were still prisoners, but for the first time in a long time, they felt a flicker of hope that they might just find a way out of this mess. And as the aliens regrouped, fuming and frustrated by their inability to break two stubborn humans, Bryn couldn't help but let out a tired laugh. "You know," she said, glancing at Torin, "I think we're starting to grow on them." Torin chuckled, the sound rough but genuine. "Let's just hope they don't decide to grow us in a petri dish next." With the taste of small victories clinging to their thoughts, Bryn and Torin prepared for whatever new schemes the aliens might concoct. Because when it came to humans, nothing was ever straightforward, and sometimes, unpredictability was their greatest weapon. The alien zoo was a monument to bad interior design, with its mishmash of translucent walls and floors that felt like walking on a trampoline covered in bubble wrap. Bryn and Torin had gotten used to this architectural nightmare, but it didn't make it any less irritating. Especially now, with the aliens getting more aggressive in their efforts to turn their brains into mashed potatoes. "You think they'd invest in a better shrink by now?" Bryn grumbled, flicking a piece of imaginary lint off her shoulder. "Maybe they're just under budget constraints." "Galactic credit crunch or something," Torin quipped, eyeing the alien leader who was still sporting that face only a motherboard could love. The alien's eyes, like two polished marbles, watched them with what could only be described as telepathic exasperation. You could almost hear it thinking, why can't these humans just break like everyone else? Bryn and Torin had developed a routine of sorts, a mix of defiance and sarcasm that seemed to keep the aliens on their toes, or their equivalent of toes anyway. The aliens were increasing their mental probing, and Bryn figured they were one step away from trying hypnosis or maybe some really bad alien pop music. "You think they're running an intergalactic game show?" Bryn wondered aloud, her tone dripping with irony. "Guess the humans' brainwaves and win a brand new spaceship," Torin chuckled, though it was a strained sound, like an elastic band stretched too far. If that's the case, their ratings must be in the toilet. The aliens didn't seem to appreciate their humor. In response, the room morphed again, colors blending until the walls looked like a Van Gogh threw up on them. It was a sensory assault designed to break their spirits, but Bryn and Torin were old hands at resisting by now. "Time to crash their party," Torin said, and with a nod, they sank into the dreamscape, this time with intent. They had discovered, almost accidentally, that they could not only control their own dreams but share them, a silent sanctuary where alien interference was muted, like putting a pillow over the universe's face. The dream unfolded like a movie they'd seen 100 times but still enjoyed, a sprawling beach under 3 moons, each casting a different hue over the tranquil sea. It was their little slice of serenity in an otherwise chaotic universe. They'd built it together, piece by piece, every grain of sand a testament to their combined willpower. "I was thinking we could add a tiki bar," Bryn mused, as they walked along the shoreline, the surf tickling their feet. "Maybe make it a little more Hawaii meets Jupiter, and I thought you said you weren't the decorating type." Torin teased, plucking a seashell from the sand and skipping it across the water. Hey, I've got hidden depths, Bryn replied, her sarcasm as comforting as a well-worn jacket, unlike these aliens who are more like a kiddie pool. With no filter, their conversations in the dreamscape were a reprieve, a chance to strategize without the aliens breathing down their necks or whatever appendages they used to breathe. They could talk freely here, away from probing minds and judgmental marbles. Seriously though, Torin said, his tone shifting to something more earnest, we need to figure out how to use this. If we can keep them out of our dreams, maybe we can figure out a way to get the hell out of this zoo. Bryn nodded, her expression thoughtful. We've been holding them off, but they're not going to stop. We need a plan, something that doesn't rely on let's just wing it. Their brainstorming sessions were often punctuated by gallows humor, a way to lighten the heavy load of their predicament. But beneath the jokes, they both knew the stakes. The aliens were getting more desperate, and desperation could lead to unpredictability. And unpredictability, while often their friend, was a double-edged sword. Back in the waking world, the alien leader had apparently decided that subtlety was overrated. The room began to shift again, this time into a nightmarish landscape straight out of an HR Giger fever dream. Walls oozing, shadows shifting, and a low hum that resonated in their bones. Great, they've moved on to the psychological horror genre, Bryn said, trying to make light of the situation even as her skin crawled. Must be their idea of upping the ante, Torin replied, rolling his eyes. Like shaking a snow globe and hoping for a blizzard, they closed their eyes, retreating once more to the beach under the moons. It was becoming second nature, this lucid dreaming, and every time they did it, they learned a little more about the rules of this weird shared mental theater. I think we can use this, Bryn said, looking at Torin with a glint of mischief in her eyes. If we can manipulate the dreamscape, maybe we can find a way to manipulate the zoo too. Torin raised an eyebrow, intrigued. You mean like? Hack it exactly, Bryn said, excitement creeping into her voice. We turn their own tactics against them. They want to explore our dreams. Let's give them nightmares. Their planning was interrupted by a sudden jolt, a physical one, as if the floor beneath them had decided to do the cha-cha. The aliens weren't just watching anymore. They were trying to shake them out of their shared dream like a couple of stubborn fleas. Looks like they're getting impatient, Torin noted dryly, bracing himself against the shifting landscape. Good, Bryn replied, a dangerous grin on her face. Let's give them something to really be impatient about. In the dream, they conjured up an image, a mental projection of them breaking free, crashing through the translucent walls, an army of dream constructs behind them. It was a bluff, but a convincing one. The alien leader's frustration was almost delicious, a palpable wave of what the hell do we do now, that Bryn and Torin soaked up like sunlight. They were playing a dangerous game, but for the first time, it felt like they were leading the dance. Think they're buying it? Bryn asked as the projection of their escape played out in vivid detail. Doesn't matter, Torin said with a shrug. As long as it keeps them off balance, the dream world shimmered, teetering on the edge of collapse as the aliens continued their assault. But Bryn and Torin held firm, anchored by their shared determination and a healthy dose of spite, because if there was one thing humans were good at, it was digging in their heels and refusing to budge. They returned to their beach, the alien assault easing off as their captors regrouped. Bryn glanced at Torin, her expression a mix of exhaustion and defiance. We need to keep this up, she said. Keep pushing, keep them guessing. Torin nodded, his resolve matching hers. We'll get out of here, one way or another. The dreamscape began to fade as they woke, finding themselves once more in the unsettling confines of the alien zoo. But now there was a spark of hope, a path forward through the chaos. The alien leader was waiting, those inscrutable eyes fixed on them with what could almost be called grudging respect. Its mental voice was a low hum, tinged with curiosity. You dreamers continue to surprise. Yeah, well, we're full of surprises, Bryn shot back, sitting up with a wince. Torin pushed himself to his feet, brushing imaginary dust off his pants. Don't underestimate the power of a good nap. The alien leader's silence was thoughtful, a pause that stretched into infinity. We will reconsider our methods. That's a start, Bryn said, crossing her arms. Now, how about letting us out of here? Or at least a change of scenery that doesn't involve melting walls. The alien didn't respond, but there was a shift, a subtle change in its demeanor that suggested their message had been received. Bryn and Torin weren't naive enough to believe it meant freedom was in sight, but it was a step, a small victory in a long, uncertain war. As the day wore on, they settled back into their routine, or as much of one as you could have in a place like this. They kept their heads down, continued to refine their dream sharing, and planned their next move with the kind of quiet determination that only came from having nothing left to lose. Think they'll ever figure us out? Torin asked during one of their strategy sessions, a wry smile playing on his lips. Bryn shook her head, her eyes glinting with that irrepressible spirit. Not if we keep changing the rules on them. In the end, they knew the road ahead was fraught with danger, but they also knew that they had each other, and that was more than enough to face whatever the universe, or a bunch of overly curious aliens, could throw at them. And as the alien zoo continued its endless, surreal dance around them, Bryn and Torin prepared to fight back, armed with nothing but their wits, their dreams, and the indomitable human spirit that refused to be caged. The alien zoo was having a bad day, and by bad, I mean it was going full tilt into an all-you-can-eat buffet of psychological warfare. Bryn and Torin felt it like a whiff of week-old fish in the air. The aliens were getting serious, which was saying something considering their usual level of serious involved turning their brains into mashed potatoes. "I think they're trying a new recipe," Bryn quipped, eyes closed, focusing on the now familiar mental tug-of-war they were engaged in. "Yeah, more salt this time." "Really brings out the flavor of my despair," Torin replied, his voice a lazy drawl that belied the tight lines around his eyes. Outside their heads, the alien leader, let's call him Picasso Face because why not, was maintaining its usual demeanor of inscrutable pompousness. A kind of dignified melancholy that only came from having a face that looked like it had been assembled by a committee of drunken art students. The walls of their enclosure pulsed with a nauseating spectrum of colors, shifting like a kaleidoscope on steroids. If the aliens were aiming for maximum discomfort, they were nailing it. The room felt alive, not in a good way, more like a rabid beast pacing its cage, itching to sink its teeth into something soft and squishy. "Think we can hold out?" Torin asked, voice taut with the strain of maintaining their shared mental sanctuary. "We've held off more persistent X's," Bryn said, shrugging as if her mind wasn't being hammered by an alien assault. "This is just another day in paradise." Their dream sanctuary, previously a tranquil beach scene, was beginning to look like a storm was rolling in. The skies darkened, a wind kicked up, and the sand felt less like a warm embrace and more like an impending sandstorm. "Storm's coming," Torin said, an unnecessary statement given the obvious state of things, but it had become a running gag, pointing out the bleeding obvious when everything was going to hell was their coping mechanism. "Yeah, I'm not much for hurricanes at the beach," Bryn replied. "Let's see if we can redirect this circus." They focused, trying to bend their mental landscape to their will, but the aliens were pushing hard. It was like playing tug-of-war with a team of weightlifters while you were stuck with a bunch of middle schoolers. All the while, the room continued to pulsate, the aliens probing and prodding with a persistence that would have been admirable if it wasn't so damn annoying. "You ever wonder what they get out of this?" Torin mused aloud, his tone conversational despite the mental strain. "I mean, is there a betting pool somewhere on which one of us cracks first?" "Probably," Bryn said with a snort. "I bet we're their favorite reality TV show. Survivor, Alien Zoo Edition." Their banter was forced, but it served its purpose. Humor was their shield, sarcasm their sword. But even the best armor has chinks, and Bryn could feel theirs starting to widen. The mental storm was growing stronger, and their sanctuary was fraying at the edges. In the physical world, the aliens seemed to sense their vulnerability. The room's colors shifted from chaotic to something more sinister, the hues darkening, becoming oppressive. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in, eager to swallow them whole. "This isn't how I imagined my vacation," Bryn grumbled, though her bravado was slipping. The alien assault was relentless, a battering ram against the gates of their minds. "Yeah, not a fan of the all-inclusive package," Torin agreed, his usual sarcasm dulled by the sheer effort of holding on. Their shared dreamscape was unraveling, the beach storm strengthening, waves crashing violently against the shore. Bryn and Torin were doing their best to patch it up, but they were running out of mental duct tape, and the aliens were relentless, their assault intensifying with a kind of grim determination that could only be described as bureaucratic. "We're going to have to try something," Torin said, a note of urgency creeping into his voice. "Like what?" "I don't think asking nicely is going to cut it," Bryn replied, though she was already thinking along the same lines. They needed a new plan, a way to push back the relentless tide. "How about a little misdirection?" Torin suggested, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Let's give them something else to focus on." Bryn nodded, catching onto his idea. In their dreamscape, they conjured another illusion, a fierce storm, but this time it was more than just weather. It was a force, a presence, a swirling vortex of chaos that threatened to swallow everything in its path. The aliens paused, their assault faltering ever so slightly, the room around them reflecting their confusion. The swirling colors hesitated, the oppressive weight of their mental presence lifting just enough for Bryn and Torin to catch their breath. "Think it'll work?" Bryn asked, knowing full well they were skating on thin ice. "It has to," Torin replied, determination lining his voice. "We need to buy ourselves some time." The storm within their shared dreamscape intensified, and though it was an illusion, the force of it was enough to give the aliens pause. For a moment, Bryn and Torin felt the mental pressure ease, the relentless probing abating as the aliens scrambled to recalibrate. Nice touch, Bryn said, watching the storm rage with a small, satisfied smile. Thank you, Torin replied with mock humility. I'll be here all night, but they both knew the reprieve was temporary. The aliens wouldn't be fooled for long, and when they regrouped, they'd come back stronger, more determined. It was the nature of things. Predators rarely gave up the chase. Let's keep them on their toes, Bryn said, the fire of defiance burning bright in her eyes. We might not be able to win, but we can definitely make them work for it. With renewed resolve, they focused on strengthening their mental defenses, patching up the holes in their sanctuary. It was a losing battle, but Bryn and Torin were nothing if not stubborn. As long as they could draw breath, they would fight, and they would make damn sure the aliens never forgot it. Outside their heads, Picasso Face seemed to sense the shift in their resolve. The alien leader's expression, or what passed for one, shifted, a ripple of surprise crossing its patchwork features. Maybe, just maybe, they were starting to understand that humans were a different kind of beast. Not easily tamed, not easily broken. The assault continued, a relentless tide against their minds, but Bryn and Torin held on. Their shared dreamscape, once a haven, now a battlefield, was their last line of defense, and they would defend it with everything they had. Ever wonder how this'll end? Torin asked, his voice barely a whisper above the mental storm. Probably in a blaze of glory, Bryn replied, a wry smile tugging at her lips. We'll make it one hell of a show. The aliens might have had the upper hand, but Bryn and Torin had something they never could, a human spirit that refused to lie down and die. As long as they had each other, they would keep fighting, keep pushing back, and keep laughing in the face of insurmountable odds. In the end, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about showing the aliens that they had picked the wrong species to mess with. And as long as they could draw another breath, there was hope. Ready to give him hell? Torin asked, his voice a low, determined rumble. Always, Bryn replied, her eyes bright with defiance. And with that, they dove back into the mental fray, determined to make sure the aliens never forgot the day they tried to break the unbreakable spirit of humanity. The Alien Zoo was like a low-budget reality show that just wouldn't get canceled. Bryn and Torin had been the unwilling stars for longer than they liked to remember. It was one episode after another of Can Humans Handle This?, with a side of let's see how much brain frying it takes before they crack. After their little stunt with the storm, Bryn and Torin were feeling a bit like those poor salmon that swim upstream only to get eaten by a bear. The aliens were the bears, the zoo was the stream, and their brains were the salmon, about to get royally chomped. So, Bryn said, her voice dripping with more sarcasm than a teenager in detention, what do you think the prize is for winning this lovely game? Probably a one-way ticket to wherever they keep the losers, Torin replied. Assuming the aliens have a concept of win that doesn't involve reducing us to drooling morons. They were knee-deep in the telepathic mud again, their mental sanctuary now barely holding together with spit and sarcasm. It was time to dig deeper, delve into their subconscious like spelunkers with a death wish. We need to go deeper, Bryn said, sounding more like a cracked meditation guru than an alien zoo captive. Yeah, great idea. Let's find the mental equivalent of an atomic bomb while we're at it, Torin shot back, but he knew she was right. The problem was, neither of them had any idea how to do it. Yet necessity is the mother of invention, or in their case, desperation was the drunk uncle of crazy ideas. They closed their eyes, focusing inward, feeling the constant alien pressure like a migraine that refused to leave after 3 aspirin and a strong drink. But somewhere beneath that headache, beneath the storm and the battered beach, there was something else, something untouched by the aliens' relentless probing. Feels like a box, Bryn murmured, her mental fingers brushing against the edges of something solid amidst the chaos. Let's open it, Torin suggested, because why not? It wasn't like they had anything to lose except their minds, and those were already on lease to Picasso Face and his merry band of torturers. With a mental heave, they pried open the box, expecting doom, despair, or just another existential crisis. What they got instead was potential. An entire landscape of possibilities unfolded before them, vast and uncharted, like a dream they hadn't dared to dream. Well, ain't this a surprise, Bryn said, staring out at the expanse of their new mental playground. It's like finding out there's an attic in a house you've lived in your whole life, and it's not full of creepy dolls, Torin added. At least I hope not. They both knew this was their shot, a chance to turn the tables on their captors. They'd been playing defense for too long, and it was time to go on the offensive. Like David with a really big slingshot against a Goliath who probably deserved a good punch in whatever passed for his face. Let's give them something to chew on, Bryn said, eyes narrowing with determination. They began to mold the landscape, sculpting it with the confidence of kids who'd just found their favorite toy. The sandy beach gave way to something more formidable, an ancient fortress, towering and impregnable, bristling with defenses that screamed, "Come at me, bro." The mental assault from the aliens wavered as they probed the new creation, hesitating like a bully who'd just realized the nerd they were picking on had a black belt in karate. "How do you like them apples?" Torin said, grinning from ear to ear. The aliens didn't like them apples, not one bit. Bryn and Torin could feel their confusion, their frustration, a tangled mess of alien thoughts trying to make sense of the unexpected shift. "They're regrouping," Bryn said, sensing the alien presence pulling back momentarily. "Let him," Torin replied. "Gives us more time to dig in." They crafted traps and barriers within their fortress, layers upon layers of mental fortifications that would give any medieval tactician a run for their money. This was their Alamo, their Helm's Deep, a place they'd make sure the aliens regretted ever stepping into. "Think they'll call our bluff?" Bryn asked, her voice a mix of hope and challenge. "Probably," Torin said. "But we won't make it easy for them." The aliens' response was as predictable as it was immediate. The room's colors shifted again, morphing into something more calculated, more precise. The assault resumed with renewed vigor, a battering ram of telepathic might against their fortress walls. "They really are like a bad neighbor," Bryn quipped. "Always dropping by uninvited and never to borrow sugar. Or maybe they're the world's worst landlords," Torin added. "Fixing the plumbing would be too much trouble, so they just try to demolish the house. Their defenses held for now, the fortress a bulwark against the alien onslaught. It wasn't easy, but nothing worth doing ever was, and Bryn and Torin were getting a little tired of the aliens' bullshit. "Let's give them a taste of their own medicine," Bryn suggested, her eyes alight with mischief. They focused, channeling their newfound potential, crafting a counterattack with the same finesse as a master painter, or at least a graffiti artist with a vendetta. A wave of energy pulsed outward from their fortress, a mental shockwave that rippled through the alien presence, sending it reeling. They could feel Picasso Face's surprise, the aliens' confusion at this unexpected reversal of fortune. "How's that for a plot twist?" Torin said, savoring the taste of victory, however temporary. "Maybe they'll rethink their career in brain harassment," Bryn replied, though she knew better than to hope. The aliens would regroup, they always did. But this time the humans had an ace up their sleeve, a weapon they hadn't known they possessed. The battle was far from over, but for the first time Bryn and Torin felt like they had a real shot. A glimmer of hope in the dark, a flicker of light in the void. It might not be enough to win, but it was enough to fight. "Let's see how they handle round two," Bryn said, determination burning in her voice. With their fortress standing strong, they braced for the next wave, ready to meet the aliens head-on, defiance etched into every fiber of their being. The aliens might have underestimated them, but Bryn and Torin were about to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. Round two was coming, and this time, the humans were bringing their A-game. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about showing the aliens that humans didn't back down, didn't roll over, and sure as hell didn't give up. As the alien zoo prepared for its next assault, Bryn and Torin stood firm, ready to face whatever fresh hell the aliens could concoct. It was time to take the fight to them, to prove that humans were more than just lab rats in an intergalactic experiment. They were survivors, fighters, and they'd be damned if they'd let a bunch of Picasso-faced aliens break them. "Here's to giving 'em hell," Torin said, raising an imaginary glass in a toast to their impending battle. "Cheers to that," Bryn replied, matching his gesture with a grin. And with that, they prepared to dive back into the fray, determined to show the aliens what it meant to mess with humanity's best and brightest. In the grand scheme of things, they might have been just two humans in an alien zoo, but they were armed with the one thing the aliens couldn't take away, the indomitable human spirit. "Ready to kick some alien ass?" Torin asked, his voice a low, fierce rumble. "Always," Bryn replied, confidence sizzling through every syllable. And so, the stage was set, the players ready, the battle about to begin anew. Whatever the aliens threw at them next, Bryn and Torin were ready to fight back, ready to prove that humans were a force to be reckoned with. In the alien zoo, amidst the chaos and the madness, a new chapter was about to unfold, one where the humans didn't just survive, they thrived. And as long as they had each other, they knew they could face anything the universe threw their way. For Bryn and Torin, the fight was far from over, but they were ready to stand strong, ready to push back, and ready to remind the aliens why humans were the most stubborn, tenacious creatures in the galaxy. With defiance in their hearts and fire in their eyes, they prepared to face the storm once more, determined to show the aliens just how unbreakable the human spirit truly was. As Bryn and Torin stood shoulder to shoulder in their fortress of mental fortitude, they couldn't help but feel like two underpaid gladiators waiting to face a horde of overzealous accountants armed with calculators and unreasonable expectations. The walls of their subconscious castle loomed large and imposing, a testament to human creativity fueled by panic and a touch of spite. "Think Picasso Face is sweating yet?" Torin asked, as they watched the alien minds regrouping at the edges of their consciousness. They could almost picture the stoic alien leader scratching its head, or what passed for one, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Aliens don't sweat, Bryn replied with a smirk. They're cold-blooded like politicians during tax season, Torin chuckled, but the sound was tight with underlying tension. Still, I'd love to see their faces right now. Bryn imagined the confusion painted across their captor's Picasso-esque features and took a small, vicious pleasure in the thought. After weeks of being on the receiving end of the aliens' mind games, it felt good to throw a wrench, or a human brain on overdrive, into the works. But they both knew this was just the beginning. All right, let's give them a show they won't forget. Bryn's words carried the weight of defiance, the kind that comes when you've been backed into a corner one too many times and decided to come out swinging. They focused, diving deeper into their shared dreamscape, sculpting it with the kind of chaotic energy usually reserved for toddlers with finger paints or politicians with Twitter accounts. The once serene fortress morphed, the ground beneath their mental feet shifting like an earthquake on steroids. How about a nice, relaxing beach? Torin suggested, his voice laced with sarcasm. With killer waves and maybe a few sharks, Bryn amended. Let's not make it too comfortable for our guests. The sand stretched out before them, sparkling under a sun that was just a bit too large, a shade too bright. The ocean roared, waves crashing down with the kind of ferocity that would make seasoned surfers pack it in and head for the hills. In the distance, they could see the dark shapes of fins slicing through the water, a not-so-subtle nod to their intentions. The aliens paused, their confusion palpable even without words. It was one thing to peer into the human mind, it was another to wade through this unpredictable dreamscape. Each wave of telepathic pressure from the aliens was met with a corresponding mental tsunami, battering against their defenses and forcing them back. Think they're regretting this little field trip yet? Torin asked, his mental voice brimming with amusement. They will be, Bryn promised. Once we really get going. The dreamscape shifted again, the beach dissolving into a twisted amusement park straight out of a fever dream. Roller coasters looped impossibly into the sky, while cotton candy clouds floated above, dripping sugary rain. It was a place where laws of physics took a vacation, and sanity checked out at the door. The aliens hesitated, their telepathic tendrils touching this new creation, with the caution of someone poking a potentially electrified fence. Each attempt to impose order was met with a relentless barrage of chaos, the humans' minds spinning out new, bizarre scenarios faster than the aliens could counter. Welcome to the funhouse, Torin announced, a mental grin in his voice. The aliens' frustration was tangible, a simmering stew of confusion and impotence. For beings used to dissecting thoughts with surgical precision, the unpredictability of human dreams was a quagmire they hadn't anticipated. It was like trying to nail jelly to a wall with chopsticks. Let's add a few more attractions, Bryn suggested, taking the mental reins. Her imagination ran wild, birthing a haunted house where the ghosts were more tax collector with an audit than friendly spirit, and a merry-go-round spinning so fast it blurred into a kaleidoscope of colors. The room's colors shifted in response, attempting once more to disorient them, but Bryn and Torin were ready. Their minds spun out distractions faster than the aliens could morph the environment. It was a battle of creativity versus control, and the humans had finally found their stride. Do you think they have an equivalent to aspirin? Torin mused. Because they're going to need it. The aliens' response was a mental snarl, their irritation as clear as a bad parody of an alien invasion movie. Bryn and Torin pressed their advantage, conjuring dreamscapes that defied logic and reason, a kaleidoscope of human imagination given free rein. From the depths of their shared consciousness, they unleashed a storm of images, warped landscapes, impossible creatures, and scenarios that twisted in on themselves like an Escher painting on acid. It was beautiful in its chaos, a testament to the untamed wildness of the human mind. The aliens were floundering, their attempts to breach the fortress met with a relentless barrage of the unexpected. Each mental thrust was parried with a counterattack born of creativity and madness, the kind of brilliance that humans excelled in when pushed to the brink. We're driving them nuts, Torin said, savoring the small victories. Good, Bryn replied, her voice hard with determination. They wanted to see what we were made of. Let's show them. As the aliens' telepathic assault began to waver, Bryn and Torin felt a surge of vindication. For the first time, they weren't just surviving, they were fighting back, using the very thing the aliens had underestimated, the chaotic, unpredictable power of human dreams. It was a symphony of disorder, a testament to the resilience of human spirit in the face of the incomprehensible. The fortress stood strong, a bastion of imagination that refused to yield. Think they'll call it quits? Torin asked, though he already knew the answer. Not a chance, Bryn said. But they'll think twice before messing with us again. With each passing moment, the aliens' efforts faltered, their psychic tendrils recoiling from the relentless barrage of human creativity. It was a battle of wills, and Bryn and Torin were determined to come out on top. "Let's give them a grand finale," Bryn suggested, feeling the tide turning in their favor. Together they crafted a final masterpiece, a dreamscape so intricate, so bewildering that it left the aliens reeling. It was a tapestry of madness, a chaotic dance of colors and sounds that defied description. In the heart of their fortress, Bryn and Torin stood united, their laughter ringing out like a clarion call. "We did it," Bryn said, disbelief mingling with triumph. "Yeah," Torin replied, a grin spreading across his face. "We showed them what humans are all about." The aliens' telepathic presence began to withdraw, their attempts to breach the fortress finally faltering against the onslaught of imagination. It was a victory, however small, in a war that had seemed unwinnable. "They're retreating," Bryn noted, a note of satisfaction in her voice. "For now," Torin agreed. "But we'll be ready when they come back." As the dreamscape settled, the fortress remained, a symbol of defiance in a universe that had often seemed indifferent. Bryn and Torin had found strength in the unlikeliest of places, in each other, and in the boundless potential of their shared dreams. "So, what's next?" Torin asked, throwing an arm around Bryn's shoulders. "We keep fighting," Bryn said, determination etched into every line of her face. "And we keep surprising them." With their fortress secure, they looked out over the dreamscape they'd created, a testament to the power of the human mind when pushed to its limits. It was a victory carved out of defiance and creativity, a reminder that even in the darkest of places, there was always a way forward. As the alien zoo fell silent, Bryn and Torin stood ready, knowing that the battle was far from over. But they'd faced the impossible and come out the other side stronger, a force to be reckoned with in a universe that had underestimated them. "Here's to the next round," Torin said, raising an imaginary glass. "To surprises and defiance," Bryn replied, matching his gesture with a nod. In the heart of their mental fortress, they stood united, ready to face whatever came next. The aliens had wanted to know what humans were made of, and Bryn and Torin had shown them resilience, creativity, and a stubborn refusal to give up. As the dust settled and the dreamscape shimmered with potential, they knew that the battle was far from over. But they'd found their strength, and they were ready to fight, ready to prove once and for all that humans were more than just animals in an alien zoo. They were survivors, dreamers, and fighters, armed with the unpredictable brilliance of their minds and the unbreakable spirit of humanity. And as long as they had that, they'd never truly be beaten. The alien zoo, a cosmic circus of the tragically curious and bizarrely imprisoned, might have once been a place of wonder. Now, it was just another drab corner of the universe where hope went to die. But Bryn and Torin were suddenly finding that hope was a stubborn little cockroach that refused to stay squashed. "Look at them," Bryn said, gesturing toward the translucent walls where Picasso face and his merry band of alien Picassos were regrouping. "I bet even their panic attacks are symmetrical," Torin snorted. "I'd pay good money to see one of them try and fill out a complaint form right now." "Dear alien manager, the humans are malfunctioning again." He mimicked the alien's voice, which sounded a bit like rusty hinges and bad abstract art. The aliens had stepped back, their Picasso-esque faces twisted in what seemed to be a blend of confusion and a bad acid trip. The surreal nightmare landscape Bryn and Torin had conjured was more than even their advanced telepathic minds could handle. "Should we, do something about the others?" Bryn asked, nodding toward the various alien captives scattered about the zoo like mismatched knickknacks at a garage sale. Each one looked as bewildered as a cat at a dog show. "Yeah, probably a good idea," Torin replied, scratching his head. "I mean, as much as I enjoy being the poster child for human resilience, it's getting a bit old." Bryn and Torin began to move among the captives. Some were vaguely humanoid, others looked like they'd been designed by a committee who couldn't agree on a single shape and just threw a bunch of body parts together in frustration. The real challenge was figuring out how to communicate with them. Not all of them had mouths or heads. Bryn stopped in front of an alien that resembled a feather duster that had seen better days. "Hey there, buddy," she said, not sure if it even had ears. "Mind sticking it to our captors?" The feather duster alien gave a little shiver, like a yes or maybe a no, or possibly an existential crisis. Torin approached a creature that looked like a sentient puddle with eyes. "Can't promise liberation comes with a gift bag, but at least you'll be free to puddle around." The puddle creature didn't respond, though it did ripple slightly. Torin hoped it meant agreement, or at the very least, mild curiosity. Bryn raised her voice, trying to sound like a motivational speaker at a very poorly attended conference. "Listen up, folks, we're staging a breakout. If you're tired of being someone's science project, now's the time to act." The room buzzed with an assortment of alien murmurs, clicks, and some sounds that might have been farts. "I think they are in," Torin said, though his confidence was about as solid as a politician's promise. The aliens controlling the zoo were regrouping, the lights flickering ominously like a horror movie cliché. Picasso's face looked particularly disgruntled, maybe because his once coherent telepathic grip was as useful as a screen door on a spaceship. "All right," Bryn said, feeling the adrenaline spike. "Time to kick this zoo into overdrive." They began coordinating the chaos with a blend of telepathic signals and frantic gestures that made them look like conductors having simultaneous strokes. The feather duster alien zipped about like it had mainlined 5 espressos, while the puddle creature slid ominously toward the walls. Others joined in, their actions as unpredictable as their forms. The walls, sensing the rebellion, began to change colors rapidly, a last-ditch effort to confuse or scare the captives back into submission. But Bryn and Torin knew the trick now. Colors were just colors, nothing more. They couldn't break an imagination unleashed. "Time to blow this popsicle stand," Torin said, and Bryn had to laugh despite herself. It was exactly the kind of ridiculous comment she needed to hear right now. Under their combined mental efforts, the room started morphing again, but this time it wasn't just Bryn and Torin in control. The captives, inspired or maybe just fed up, were adding their own flourishes. Feather Duster spun the dreamscape into a chaotic swirl of colors and textures, while the puddle creature turned the floor into a slick surface that sent the aliens skidding like bad actors on ice. The aliens tried to reassert their control, but their telepathic powers were like trying to hold a sandcastle together with spit. The humans and their impromptu allies were determined. Picasso's face and his crew were pulling back, their mental powers battered and bruised. "Looks like they're finally getting the message," Bryn said, watching the aliens retreat. "Humans aren't just for exhibit anymore." Torin grinned. "Maybe we should get a part-time gig as zoo liberators. Have your captors lost control?" Call Bryn and Torin's rebellions Arus. The remaining captives were coming into their own, throwing their unique abilities into the mix. Some were conjuring illusions, others shifting matter, all working in a bizarre harmony that, while not quite symphonic, was undeniably effective in causing disorder. The mental fortress Bryn and Torin had built was no longer just theirs. It had become a shared asylum for the misfit toys of the universe, a ragtag orchestra of defiance playing a tune the aliens couldn't dance to. "Think they'll write a paper on this?" Torin asked as they worked to keep the chaos controlled, at least enough to not implode. "Sure," Bryn replied, dodging a flailing tentacle from one of their new allies. Title it "Why You Shouldn't Poke the Human Brain with a Stick." The alien captors, realizing that the zoo was spiraling into a full-blown riot, began to retreat in earnest, their control slipping through their fingers like wet soap. The Picasso faces were siring into something more akin to spilled paint, a mess of frustration and defeat. As the aliens' telepathic grip disintegrated, Bryn and Torin felt a momentary, glorious clarity. They'd done it. They'd turned the tables, turned a prison into a battlefield, and then a victory parade. "Well, would you look at that," Torin said, glancing at the retreating forms of their captors. "We're free." Sort of, Bryn echoed, still trying to grasp the reality that their captors were the ones running for the hills, or whatever the alien equivalent was. The alien zoo was no longer a place of confinement, at least not for them. The captives, a motley crew of interstellar oddities, seemed to be regaining some semblance of autonomy. There was a celebratory air of lunacy, like a New Year's Eve party where everyone had shown up an hour early and already started drinking. In the aftermath, the captives were milling about, some cautiously exploring the edges of their former prison, others just sitting in stunned silence. The feather duster alien gave a triumphant little shimmy, and even the puddle creature seemed to be basking in its newfound freedom. "So what's next?" Torin asked, nudging Bryn. "Now that we're not the entertainment, guess we figure out how to get out of here for good," Bryn said, looking around at the eclectic group of newly liberated beings. "Might need to work on our cross-species communication skills." Torin scratched his chin. "Yeah, maybe invest in a universal translator or, I don't know, a really big megaphone." The reality of their situation was settling in. They'd reclaimed their minds, sparked a rebellion, and now stood at the precipice of whatever came next. It was terrifying and exhilarating, the kind of stuff that turned ordinary folks into heroes, or in their case, heroes into slightly more seasoned survivors. As the dust began to settle and the alien zoo came to resemble a cosmic mess hall rather than a prison, Bryn and Torin took a moment to reflect. "Do you think they'll come back?" Torin asked, a hint of concern in his voice. Bryn shrugged, "Probably, but now they know what we're made of, that we're not just going to sit around and let them poke our brains like some cheap sideshow attraction." Torin chuckled. "We've set the bar pretty high for human audacity." "Yeah, and we'd better keep it that way," Bryn said, her eyes scanning the zoo. "We've shown them resilience, and maybe a little insanity too." As the alien zoo slowly returned to a semblance of order, albeit a more chaotic one, Bryn and Torin knew their job wasn't done. They'd sparked a rebellion, but there was still a universe out there that might not be ready for the kind of chaos they'd unleashed. But for now, they'd relished their small victory. The aliens had tried to unravel them, but instead, Bryn and Torin had woven a tapestry of resistance and camaraderie among the captives. It was a testament to the human spirit, one that refused to be caged or catalogued. "Here's to the next round," Torin said again, raising another imaginary glass. To surprises, defiance, and maybe a little madness, Bryn replied, matching his gesture with a nod. Together they stood amidst the liberated zoo, aware that the battle wasn't over, but they were ready. With imagination as their weapon and defiance as their shield, Bryn and Torin would face whatever came next with the same irrepressible spirit that had gotten them this far.